and we'll get going. All right, so welcome to our Wednesday night CAPS meeting, February 23rd. Do a quick housekeeping with some notes that I've got, and then we'll get into our presenter, Chris Attrell, talking to us about night photography. And then after the presentation, members from the other clubs, you're still welcome to join in after. Bill will be doing our presentation on our last monthly assignment, which was light trails. And that would wrap us up for the evening. So as far as housekeeping goes, the inter-club images that everybody voted on are now up on the web if you want to see which ones have been entered. Helen and Brenda have sent them off, so they've been submitted. Now they're in the judging stage in the competition against the Wyndham Club in England. Next month, so our next meeting will be a hybrid again, where we'll be back in the Golden Circle as well as on Zoom. So that will be I think it's the 11th. No, that would be the 9th of March is the next meeting. Those that registered for Rob's basic photography course, I sent out an email. So if you guys are on the meeting tonight, if you could just provide your feedback so that if needed, Rob can adjust the presentation, and then eventually we'll get it up on the website for everyone to enjoy. And I'd also like to thank Rob for putting that on. It was a great session, and I think everybody got something out of it. And then finally, my last housekeeping note is spring competition is, I know it's still a little ways away, but next week is March already. So everybody interested in entering for the spring competition in the categories, start thinking about it now. All the information's on the website in the member section. So hope to see some great images, and video comes around in the spring competition as well. So now I'll pass it over to Judy, and Judy can introduce Chris with our presentation for the night.
Okay. Welcome, Chris, and welcome to other members of our Alliance. Just a little bit about Chris before he begins his presentation. He began his photographic journey in 1996 as a landscape and nature hobbyist, but his interest took a more localized turn in 2003 when he started to explore rural Alberta and Saskatchewan and seeking out symbols of the prairie past, grain elevators, ghost towns, and abandoned buildings. And I think a lot of our members like to photograph those things too. And he recognized the historical significance of these pioneer relics, and he set out to document Saskatchewan's heritage. And over the last 10 years, he's built and run several successful online photo galleries, and he's got several books out. And Chris's love of the prairies prompted him to move from Banff, Alberta, we maybe question that, to Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, where he currently lives. So take it away, Chris. Oh, you have to unmute, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. And yes, the move to Banff to Shaunavon was mostly because of house prices. I got married and my wife wanted a house, and in Shaunavon, it was much more affordable back in those days. But also living here in Shaunavon's been very good because I pretty much live in the middle of a dark zone. And so that's how I got into night photography. My first time I ever tried to do night photography was actually when I missed the Greyhound bus in Golden, BC at midnight. So I spent all night trying to do night photography with a film camera and failed. But coming out here, it was pretty easy. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of a combination of talking about like abandoned houses, shooting them at night, night photography, and at the same time too, just giving my sort of easy lesson as I'm going along. I know a lot of you guys are probably pros and already know how to do great night photography, but I like to get beginners and people who've never tried it out there shooting as well. And so it'll be a combination of a little bit of everything, because I was also told I got a little bit of extra time too. But yes, as you mentioned, I live in Southwest Saskatchewan, where there's so many cool abandoned buildings. I got hooked on shooting them like 2003 before I even moved out here. But now that I live out here and I get to hear the stories and all the, you know, because they're friends of Pete and mine, right, who own these places. So that's how I came up with my first book, Forgotten Saskatchewan, was mostly abandoned places. Oh yeah, I should share my screen. Oh yeah, here it is. I gotta just remember how to do this properly. Oh, here we go. You guys can see that, I assume. But I've always been a night owl by default. It's been a big thing for my whole life. I can't go to bed until like 3 in the morning anyway. So when I lived in downtown Calgary, I worked at like oil and gas companies doing IT work, but they always wanted me there at 7. So that's kind of like why I moved to Banff and Shaunavon, was because I couldn't start working at 7 or 8. But this is what I love doing. I go all over Western Canada and I just like shooting at night. And I do photography classes all over the place. So what I'm going to be doing in this class is describing some of the techniques that I use and some of the issues about shooting at abandoned places. The first thing I always tell people when they're going to go shoot at night is that you've got to take your safety very seriously. A lot of these places are very dangerous. So that's why I always say safety first. And I guess it can be second and third. When you go to abandoned houses like this, sometimes there's even abandoned wells. That's why I always go to my places that I shoot at night during the day first, and I look for all the hazards before I go shooting at night. There's also sharp things in the grass. And if there's a mama animal with babies at any of these places, I don't even go shoot there. The mama animals don't want you there at night. Oh, by the way, I've also got the chat on. So if anybody does have any questions while we're, oh, where did it go? Oh, here it is. So if anybody does have any questions during this presentation, just feel free to send a question into the chat box.
Chris, I could monitor the chat if you like, if you want.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay, we'll do.
And yeah, so all these places I go during the day and I inspect everything. And you get to plan the shots too. I've never been hurt at night because I take my safety very seriously. Like this is Dinosaur Park near Drumheller, or near Brooks. At that place, I did not know. I discovered in the middle of the night, rattlesnakes just sleep in the middle of nowhere. So you should be kind of familiar with when you go at night. You know, you don't want to come across a rattlesnake or anything like that. Also, if you're on private property, especially in the last year or two, they've changed the laws. You can now be charged with trespassing after you visit a place. So if you went on someone's property and took a picture, they can now charge you with trespassing. The reason why I mentioned that is because 10 years ago, nobody really cared that much. But in the last few years, there's been a lot of theft. I mean, a lot of it. They're stealing things off farms everywhere. And some people have also abused going on to private property to shoot abandoned places, like walking through crops. So you should get permission. In Saskatchewan, it's pretty easy. You just pull over on the side of the grid road and you wait until somebody drives by, and they usually know who owns that property. I get about a 70% success rate getting permission that way in Saskatchewan. In Alberta, it's much less. It's much harder to get permission. But I mean, there's still ways to find it. Sometimes you can even just get an RM map and ask the owner. If you ask for permission and you offer a free photo, they generally say yes. There's also been some people who've been doing, oh, someone asked if I'm doing outdoor photography sessions planned in southern Saskatchewan. Yes, here in Shaunavon, which is like 2 hours from Medicine Hat, I'm doing some abandoned house night photography classes here in the area. All 3 places I got permission to shoot at too, and they're pretty cool. You'll see them in this video too. But there are some people who have done, like they're doing abandoned tours on private property. They don't have permission. Like Bobby Scott in Calgary, he gets permission. So those ones are cool. So farmers are really getting angry about it. And I get calls all the time because sometimes people will say, well, Chris Attrell's done it and I got permission. But yeah, I just wanted to cover that part. Safety first. which also means to check your weather forecast. Have you ever been caught out in the middle of nowhere when it's really foggy? Oh, I hate that. You have to drive so slow. So, as you guys all know, for night photography, you need a camera with a tripod, flashlight. You know, you need the basics. I'm not against photoshopping or expensive equipment. I just too impatient to do editing on my computer. Like I just don't like being on my computer. And until last year, I never had an expensive camera. My wife bought me a Nikon Z6 II last year, mostly because it's got the flip screen, so I don't hurt myself when I bend over. But so the way I teach it, the way I show it is maybe different than how you do night photography, but I just like taking one shot, and I don't like doing, like I like those people who can replace skies and stuff. It's pretty neat, but I don't do it. I mostly now just take basic, simple astro landscapes. One picture without Photoshop. And again, it's only because I don't know how to use Photoshop and I don't have the patience. Plus I got too many cats. When you have cats, you can't sit in front of your computer too long because they get upset. So I'm also gonna teach you how I lit the inside and outside. It's pretty simple stuff. And I got all my equipment here. I know most of you guys know how to do all this stuff, but first, before I always recommend for beginners, if you want to do night photography, you should get used to operating your camera in the dark. This seems to be the hardest thing for beginners, is remembering where all the buttons are when you can't see them, especially when there's cold wind, mosquitoes, and creepy sounds everywhere. So if you want to do night photography first, I recommend you put your camera on a tripod and go do urban night photography. This is so easy. And if you do it, you know, on a night when it's like, don't do it Friday or Saturday night when there's like tons of people, but like when it's like less traffic, all you have to do is put your camera in shutter TV mode. Like this is the beginner way, not the pro way. I just put my camera in TV or shutter mode. So shutter mode on my camera. That's on the mode dial for most of you don't know. And I just choose a shutter speed. So like, let's just say I was going to go shoot downtown Red Deer today. I'd probably just put my camera to 5 seconds. So all you have to do is press the shutter button. I even use auto ISO for most of this because when you're shooting in urban environments, the goal is to shoot and get out fast. If you stay in one place more than 2 or 3 minutes, people come and talk to you. I know it doesn't sound bad, but sometimes you'll be talking to people for 20 minutes. They just find photographers to be suspicious. So I get in and out in as fast as possible. So that's why I use auto ISO and I don't use manual mode. I use 5 seconds for most buildings, but most importantly, you're getting experience operating your camera in the dark, because the hardest thing about night photography is staying up. The second hardest thing is remembering where all these buttons are in the dark. So this is a great way, and you guys probably already know how to change your ISO. But if you're a beginner, you can use auto for this. You can learn the ISO part later. It's more important for you to just remember how to operate your camera when it's dark. And then I just go around and shoot stuff like this. I love doing this. This is Tabor, Alberta. By shooting a 15-second exposure, I made sure I got the streak of the car going through. I could have handheld this shot. I could have just stood across the street, picked up my camera, and took the same picture. But by shooting for 15 seconds, it's such a higher quality image. There's no motion blur because the camera's on a tripod. And it's probably used, my camera probably chose 100 ISO and f11 anyway. So you get these really clean images. I can print this thing 4 feet by 6 feet and get no grain. And you know, this shot in particular, this was done with an entry-level Canon M50. I bought this cheap little camera just so I could do videos. And I call this my urban dark photography, because if you're in downtown Regina, you don't want to carry a $3,000 camera. You want to carry an inexpensive one in case you get robbed.
So EDS, what lens you use for that one? What lens did you use?
Oh, you know what? And this is the other cool thing. I just use my kit lens for all this. This lens is very easy for urban dark photography. You don't want to be putting heavy, expensive lenses on your camera because you're going to be moving around a lot. People are going to be bumping into you. You don't want to wreck your camera. So I try to go as light as possible. So even when I have my Nikon Z6 II, I just leave the kit lens. Just that way, you know, if you do drop your camera or bang it, at least it's the kit lens that's broken.
Is that like an 18 to 55 or something? Or
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Just the simple lens that came with it.
Yeah.
And I've honestly found over the past like 5 years of doing urban dark photography that I actually find it is much easier to have a camera that's more portable, because the image quality is almost as good on the M50 as it is on the Z6 when you're doing this. Oh, and someone asked about the nifty 50. Yes, you could do the nifty 50, but then you're sort of restricting yourself. You know, you have to get closer or further away. And I've also learned by doing urban dark photography, you should never go in the road. You look and there's no cars, and as soon as you get your tripod set up, here comes a car. So I like the 18 to 55, but the 50 works great, and I've done it myself. This was actually shot with a 50 millimeter. But this is what I'm talking about. Like when you're doing this kind of photography to get used to before you do night photography, it's very satisfying. And if you spend most of your time just learning with the skill, less time about learning the settings when you're a beginner, your enthusiasm increases because you're getting great pictures without doing a lot of work. This is a 30-second exposure. You guys heard of Sand in Ghost Town out in BC by Caslow? So I just put my camera to 30 seconds in shutter mode because all I want to do was shoot this train, but I climbed up the train, by the way. You see how I climbed to the top of the train? I put my flashlight in the headlight for 1 second. But because I kept moving, you don't see me. And I'll cover more about the painting with light at the end of class. But by doing these kind of pictures at first, you see all the detail? Any entry-level camera will do this kind of a good job. No grain, no motion blur. You can print these things 6 feet by 4 feet, and they look great. That's why even though I could have handheld this shot, I don't. And I love old architecture in urban environments at night. But the problem is, you're at the mercy of street lamps. If they had a big street lamp in front of this, it would have ruined this shot. So half the stuff you do won't work anyway. But when you do find a cool building like Daysland, Alberta's movie theater, I just love it. I'm across the street and I'm doing a 5-second exposure. That's all I did. Shutter speed, 5 seconds, auto ISO. You see the moth on the poster? Because we took a 5-second exposure, it retains all the detail. You don't lose anything. But again, most importantly, you're getting experience. The first thing when you're shooting night photography, if there's any mosquitoes out there, for some reason with mosquitoes and wind, it's hard to remember all the buttons are. I've seen it myself because I do so many infield classes. But yeah, you keep all these detail. But half your pictures will look like garbage, and of the other half that you took, half will be great, half will just be okay. It's all street lamps, nothing you can do about it. But people think this is expensive cameras. This is just an entry-level camera. They're not always this good though, because like I said, street lamps, people. And the best part is, because I used to live in Banff, that's when I learned the trick in like 2004, 2005, that if you take like a 3 or 4 second exposure, if somebody's walking down the street and they keep moving, they won't be in the exposure. So you can still have people walking by, and as long as they keep moving. And another advantage is you can use autofocus for urban dark photography. This is that church south of Drumheller. I think it's called Dallam, Alberta, just south of Drumheller. And this is just autofocus, shutter mode, long exposures. It's nothing that anybody can't do. Any beginner can do this. That's why I always recommend, if you've never done night photography, start with urban dark. And just in case anybody is a real beginner here, I'm just going to put into the chat the notes for this class. It's called Night Photography PDF, and I'm uploading it now. So it'll give you some more detail on how to do urban, because you could just go outside of your house and practice this. It's not really that difficult. And I wish I would have learned this before I started doing night photography, because it took me like many tries to get night photography handled. And it's always because I forgot something, because, you know, wait till you're in the middle of nowhere and you hear your first really creepy sound. Because, you know, your imaginations amplify at night. All right. Now, the next step is for night photography too. It is different, urban dark photography, than when you're doing it in rural environments. Like I live in real rural environments. Like there's nothing, there's no lights, it's dark. So I like to teach people to do infinity focus. Some of your lenses, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have those really expensive prime lenses with the infinity ring, and you probably already know how to get to infinity with those. But if you're a beginner, I'm just going to give you an easy way to get to infinity focus that doesn't take that much effort. Infinity focus means everything's in focus except for the immediate few feet in front of you. So for the purpose of this lesson, I'm just going to call it 6 feet. It varies. It depends on your lens and your camera, how much infinity will cover. But generally speaking, 6 feet. You notice the tree branches right in front of me? They're not in focus. So when you're in infinity focus, everything's in focus except for the immediate 6 feet from you. In this case, I wanted out of focus tree branches anyway, so it worked. And this is what I use for most of my photography, night photography. So if you're a beginner, most of you have a switch on your lens that says MF, AF. You can just put that to MF. If you've got a mirrorless camera, you may have on your directional pad something that says MF or the AF. You want to be in manual focus. If you can't figure it out, your manual will have it, or you can just go into YouTube and type in your camera model with the word manual focus. Because I think the Nikon 5600, you have to go into the menu and change it. Next thing is live view. By default, most mirrorless cameras have live view on by default. It just comes on. But if you don't have, if you've never used live view on your camera before, if you got a Canon camera, there's usually a button with a red dot beside it. Once you press this button, live view should come on. And if you press it again, you turn live view off. For most Nikon cameras, there's a button or a switch or lever that says LV. That stands for live view. When you press it or pull it, that'll turn live view on the back of the camera. Live view will drain your battery much faster, so use it wisely. And I do recommend that if you're going to use live view a lot, maybe get an extra battery or two. Because if your battery dies in the middle of the night, you just can't go to 7-Eleven and buy another one. Next step is, unless you're using a prime lens, you usually have 2 rings on your lens, zoom and focus. For night photography, don't zoom in at all. Open your lens wide to get the most sky. Then your other ring is your focus ring, and things should go in and out of focus. For Canons, it's usually right here at the end. And, but yeah, it depends on your lens, but you should be able to figure it out. If you have a prime lens, of course, you only have a focus ring, no zoom. So I'm going to be assuming you're going to be you're doing your first night shots with a kit lens. But before we go into more kit lens, I just want to point out, most pros or experienced night photographers will end up getting a specialty lens for night photography. You can do most of your night photography with the kit lens that came with your camera, the 18 to 55. But the reason why a lot of photographers get those really nice pictures at night is because they bought one of these. This lens in particular is the Sigma Art 20mm prime lens. It has a really wide aperture, it goes to 1.4. Some also have the Tokina wide angle lens. But you're looking at spending about $800 to about, I don't know, $1,300 to get one of these lenses. You don't need one, but if you're ever wondering why people get some really cool shots, it's because of the lens itself. My favorite lens I've ever used is the Art Sigma 20mm, but Canon makes a 20mm, Nikon, Sony, they all have their 20mm prime lenses too. The reason is because those 14mm prime lenses are sometimes too wide, and it may be like a 50mm, the focal length is zoomed in too much. 20mm for me personally, I love that focal length. All right, so to get to, well, I did it wrong. To get to infinity focus, there's many different ways to do it, but one of the things you're going to have to practice doing is learning to focus on distant light sources over here. If you see way in the distance, there's this light 8 kilometers away. For this picture, I focused here because this house is too close to me. If you focus on something too close to you, you may create the bokeh effect and have out of focus stars. Since I know that house is more than 6 feet away from me and I had a wide angle lens, I focused here. I don't always do that. Sometimes I will focus on the house, but I focused here. I know it sounds hard, but once you know what you're doing and you've got experience operating your camera in the dark, this process will become easy. See, if you focus on something too close to you and you get the bokeh effect and your stars aren't sharp. If you do infinity focus by focusing on something, and this is a rule of thumb, if your lens is wide open and you manually focus on a light source or any source 30 feet away from you or further, you're going to be in infinity focus. It's probably going to be more like 16 feet, 2 inches or something like that, but you're not bringing a measuring tape with you. So as a rule of thumb, I just make sure I'm focusing on something 30 feet away, and 8 kilometers is more than 30 feet away. So when this is what your camera looks like when you're in live view at night focusing. You can see it's much easier to manually focus at night using live view than it is to handheld during the day. So it may look intimidating now, but at nighttime, I'll show that again just so you can see. Like I'm on Mount Norquay looking down at Banff. Oops, how did that go again? There you go. See how you can tell when it's out of focus and you play with that ring. Then there's that moment you just know. So that's why you should also practice this at home before you go out. Because it's only hard the first time. By the third time, you're going to find this to be very simple. So in order to do this, it gets even easier. Almost every camera has a magnification button on the back. So when you're in live view and you press your magnification button, you can magnify your screen 8 to 10 times. Once your screen is magnified, then you play with the focus ring, you can focus on stuff far away. I focused on a cell phone tower 30 kilometers away once. I can even focus on the brightest star with my new Nikon. So look for Canons, there's usually a magnification button right up here. For Nikons, it's on the side usually here. For Sonys and Fujis, I think as soon as you play with the focus ring, your screen magnifies automatically anyway, so you don't need to do this process. But now here's what it looks like. When you magnify in 8 times, then you can use your directional pad to move around the screen and then play with your focus ring. But now it's just a case of remembering where that button is when it's cold, mosquitoes, creepy sounds. But this makes it pretty easy. Because sometimes you can't find a distant light source. So you have to make your own with a flashlight. And that's what I'll do sometimes. If all else fails, I just get a bright flashlight, like this one. I'll find something 30 feet away from me or further, illuminate it, manually focus on that, and then shoot. In fact, sometimes I'll pick up my tripod and I'll manually focus on something 30 feet away from me over here to my left. Then I'll pick my tripod up and plunk it down to shoot, because it doesn't matter which direction. Just practice the 30 feet away, and then you can learn more about your lens and camera to find out more about what the actual length is. Why not use the back button focus when zoomed in? Oh, if you have the back button focus when you make, yes. If you use back button focusing, that would work too. I've never done it. I programmed my button for back button focusing once, but I don't know. I'm just too clumsy for it. But that would work. In fact, with my new Nikon, when I magnify, I can actually turn on autofocus and I'll usually get it, because this camera is really, really good. I can't believe I can autofocus on stuff at night, but I still do it the old-fashioned way anyway. See, this is what happens when you focus on something too close to you. This Lincoln is about 4 feet in front of me, so I manually focus right here on the back of the Lincoln. Because I focus on something too close to me, you notice the bokeh effect, the black background is all blurred. I actually like bokeh effect at night sometimes, so it doesn't bother me one bit. But this is why you want to focus on 30 feet away or further. But in this case, if I focus on these light sources, then this would have been out of focus. So if all else fails, make sure your subject is in focus. This would have been an ugly picture if the sky was in focus, but the Lincoln was not. And if I would have just walked back a few feet, I could have had everything in focus, but I actually wanted the Lincoln. I did not know when I shot this, that this aurora blob thing, this is some kind of rare aurora blob event. If I would have known it was rare, I would have shot it, but I didn't know it was rare. I just thought it was annoying. But yeah, so get your focusing down before you go out to a place like this in the middle of the night. From my experience, learning how to focus is one of those things that you have to do once or twice before you go out, because it's much harder once you do get here. And a better time to do this is when you got that full moon phase. We just went through it, but I think the next full moon is March 14th or 15th. So that week before the full moon and a few days afterwards, if you can start practicing this stuff during that time, it'll be much easier on you than when it's pitch dark. Pitch dark's cool for shooting. Bright moons are better for focusing. So on this one here, it's the full moon at Castle Mountain Bridge near Banff. And it was so easy to focus on this with the full moon. Like, it took me no effort. I think I could even autofocus on it if I wanted to. And you don't even have to have a flashlight when it's like bright moon, snow. You can just walk around like a normal person. So once you feel like you know how to operate your camera in the dark, that's urban dark photography. And then you've learned some manually focusing at night. Now, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, some of these prime lenses do have an infinity ring, but even though my Art Sigma does have the infinity ring, I don't use it. I'm not very, when you line it up, I seem to miss it, so I don't use it. But if you're good at that, feel free. Okay, so now we're gonna go shoot at night. When you're gonna go do night photography, this is when you do want to shoot in full manual mode. So if you're gonna go to Drumheller or Dinosaur or some abandoned place, so on your mode dial, we're gonna use manual mode. If you've never done night photography before, I'm gonna make sure that you can get a shot your first time. There's different opinions about what settings to use for night photography or what night events. But for your first shot, I want to make sure you can get a well-exposed image that's in focus. We're not going to worry about auroras, lightning, or any of that other stuff, because that's what you should do when you got experience. But once you know how to take a simple exposure at night, so once you're in manual mode, we're going to set ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. First one is ISO. This is the one that throws off a lot of people because they read different opinions about ISO. And so they change their camera settings based on what they read. All those opinions that you read online are correct because it's customized for the person's experience, camera, and lens, plus the environment they're shooting in. Full moon, no moon, you know, how close to a city you are or not. But basically what ISO does, the higher the ISO, it's more sensitive. But you notice it's a little bit grainier. Lower ISOs are cleaner images. But it took me 10 seconds to get the same exposure as 6400. It only took 2 seconds. So for me, the most important thing was to get the creepy clouds. I didn't want smooth clouds. So I had to shoot 2 seconds, high ISO. You can learn more about this stuff later. If you're a beginner and never shot night photography, I just recommend you set your camera to 3200. It's a great beginner ISO. Anything higher will still work, but anything lower may result in, you know, too dark of an image. I do recognize if it's a full moon, 3200 ISO is probably overkill, but you're just a beginner trying to get your first shot. So you can't use auto ISO at night. So if you don't know how to change your ISO, it should be in the manual, but for most cameras, there's just an ISO button. You press it, go to 3200. If your camera doesn't go that high, only 1600, then just choose that. There's nothing wrong with going to 6400, but 12,800 is probably too high. And for Nikons, you got to do it in your menu, not the ISO button. You go to menu, go to ISO sensitivity, and for default, this is what you leave your camera at, 100 on. For night photography, it's 3200 off. Turn this off for night photography, turn it back on when you're done night photography. Well, unless you're a pro, you already know how to use ISO, then you can just ignore that part. Next, we're going to do aperture. You need to shoot a wide aperture as a beginner for night photography. I know some photographers at night, they shoot like f8 now, but they shoot like 20 minutes. We're not going to shoot 20-minute exposures. We want to shoot a wide aperture. So if you, on your camera, aperture is regulated by your lens. So the widest aperture you can shoot with a kit lens, there's these f-stop values you're going to see on the back of your camera. If your lens is wide open, you should be able to get this down to 3.5. See how the iris is wide open? That lets in the most light. So we're going to change this value. It's going to look like this on your camera. Change this down to 3.5. if you can. If you can go wider, like the 2 or 1.8, you can do that as well. My favorite aperture for night photography is f2, but I have the lens for that. The kit lens can only go to 3.5, but the lower the f-stop value, the wider the aperture. If you have a camera with 2 command dials, one of these command dials will change the aperture value. If you got a camera with only 1 command dial, you're going to have to hold the exposure compensation button on the top of your camera or back, and then spin the, or touch screen. I missed the screen here, I think. I'm new to PowerPoint. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, and you have to make sure your lens is wide open, because to get to the widest aperture, your lens has to be wide open. If you've zoomed in, most lenses, you can't get to 3.5. And then that's what the value looks like when you're spinning your wheel, all the way down to 3.5. And if you got a 1 command dial, hold this button and then spin your command dial. This is what it looks like. Hold the exposure button down. Perfect. That's all you have to do. So no matter what, if you're a beginner and never done this before, ISO 3200, aperture 3.5 or wider. If you have a Canon camera, some of them only go to f4, and that's fine. But no matter what, use those 2 settings for your first shot. There's only one thing left to do, and that's choose a shutter speed. This is going to depend on what kind of night you have. If it's a full moon with snow, you could probably shoot 2-second exposure. If you're out here in Shaunavon on a night with no clouds and no moon, you might have to shoot a 30-second exposure or even longer, but 30 seconds to usually do it. So this is a pretty bright moon night. So it took me a 10-second exposure. That's why this is the easiest night photography class you'll ever take, because you're going to choose one of about 9 shutter speeds. It's either going to be 30 seconds, 25, 20, 15, 13, 10, 8, or 5. Maybe in rare cases 2. So let's set our camera to 30 inches or 30 seconds. Oh, here's what it looks like. When you take a 10-second exposure, do you see it's correct? 30 seconds was overexposed. So that's the only thing you're going to be playing with your first time, is just shutter speeds, not ISO, not aperture. So on your camera, when you spin your command dial, you don't have to do a toggle switch this time. You want to change your shutter speed till you see the inches symbols. And we're going to go all the way to 30 inches. So now your camera's set up, 3200 ISO, aperture value 3.5, 30 seconds. And then if you take a shot and it's too bright, spin your wheel to 25 seconds, take another picture. If it's still too bright, go 20, 15, 13, 10, 8, or 5. One of them will be the correct exposure. Then you just have to start shooting. This is Meeting Creek, just not my cameras. And that's what I did for this shot. I just shot 3.5, 3200 ISO, and I played with shutter speed till I got the exposure that I wanted. You don't have to get anything more than just your experience your first few times. Eventually, you do want to start shooting lower ISOs if you want, or you can go longer shutter speeds. Every night event's going to be different. But once you get your first night shot and it's in focus and it's bright enough, you're so excited. When you shoot at night and your pictures are too dark or they're blurry, out of focus, or something's wrong, you're less likely to go try again. But the enthusiasm from getting it right, nothing else is more exciting as for a beginner. So do these settings, and guess what? It gets even easier. You can do these settings at home before you go out. So if you're going to go shoot tonight, pick up your camera, put it in manual mode, do these settings first, and then all you have to do is get into your car, drive to wherever you're going to go, put your camera in a tripod, turn on live view, focus, and then hit the shutter button. It doesn't get any easier because it's going to be hard to remember where your buttons are. When I got this new camera last year, it took me a few weeks before I could remember where the buttons are. But it's now at the point I could just feel my camera and know where the buttons are. Then you can go shoot at night. But don't go to the hardest places you can think of. This is what Moraine Lake looks like when it's an 86% moon. You see how bright that looks? But if you go to Moraine Lake on a night where there's no moon, no clouds, even a 30-second exposure is probably going to be too dark using these settings. It's really, really remote, really, really dark. But on a bright moon, and you know, if you want to go shoot Moraine Lake, you can't really go during the day anymore. I was there in October and the parking lot was already full at sunrise. But if you go to Moraine Lake at midnight, there's like 3 people here. It was like easy. You just park your car and walk to the top and start shooting. But if you go on when there's like at least some moon, easy. Also, the back of your screen, once your eyes have adjusted for the night sky, the back of your screen will, for most cameras, will show an image that's going to be 1 stop brighter than what the image is going to look like when you get it home onto your computer. So if you took a 10-second exposure and it looked correct on the back of the camera, you might as well take a 13 and a 15-second exposure on top of it. So you have 3 different exposures, because a 15-second exposure is going to be 50% brighter because of the longer shutter speed. I try not to underexpose my images at night. If anything, I don't mind error on overexposing a little bit, which is different than for my daytime photography. You just don't want to have them too dark. So play with the shutter speeds anyway. Because I know you can adjust the screens and make them darker so they match better, but then it messes things up for your daytime stuff. So I just learned to overexpose slightly. That's why I take 3 pictures, and it literally only takes 15 seconds to take another picture, so you might as well do it. So any questions about any of those settings so far? Okay, so what I mean by hard places is, like, going to Banff is probably a pretty easy place to go shoot at night as long as you're not going to anything hard. But going to something like Crescent Falls in the middle of the night when you're a beginner, that's not easy. Or going to Moraine Lake. If I was living there in Red Deer, I would probably just, oh, where would I go? Actually, I can't even think of anything within an hour that I'd go shoot at. But I would try to make it down to Drumheller, that's for sure. You've got the Hoodoos you can shoot at night. You can go over to that little mini church down by the Tyrrell Museum. So many places for beginners to shoot at night. The easiest place I've ever shot nighttime with beginners was at Dinosaur Park north of Brooks, because you can park your car and start shooting at night within like 90 feet of your vehicle, or sometimes 180 or 200 feet from your vehicle. So it makes it a little bit easier when you don't have to like hike a lot, and there's light sources that you can make, and white clay is easier. But those settings I gave you on that cheat sheet, I had uploaded into the chat box. So you can get a little sense of like some of the settings. I did also put in there some settings for different night events, like Milky Way. This is one of my older Milky Way shots I did like 7 years ago with an entry-level camera. But you can see, I had to crank up my ISO to 6400. If you shoot beyond 25 seconds, you'll start seeing star trails. So you want to keep that exposure 25 seconds or lower if you want to shoot Milky Way. And to be honest, you're probably going to have to upgrade your lens to get really good Milky Ways. Now that I've got this Art Sigma, my Milky Way pictures are much higher quality than what they were a few years ago with an entry-level camera with a Tokina wide-angle lens. But if you do want any lens recommendations, after class, you could send me a chat or an email, and I'll recommend some good ones. But be honest, you're going to be paying money, but it is worth it. So that's what you want for Milky Way. And the best time for Milky Way shots, in my opinion, is in May, because the galactic core part comes out like right about now until like October. But in May, it's usually there right when the sun goes down and the mosquitoes are still dead. So that's why I like May Milky Way, so I don't have to take 30-second exposures with mosquitoes biting me. It's in the southeastern sky on a moonless night. So that would be a good place to shoot Badlands. I go to make a trip to the Badlands for that one. My favorite place for shooting the Milky Way in May is right here at Cascade Ponds in Banff. You can shoot the Hoodoos at Drumheller and get those really good. And of course, Dinosaur Park is pretty easy too. And I'm going to be doing, when is my thing? I'm doing a night photography class. I think it should be the one on the 21st or the 27th here in May. We'll be able to get Milky Ways on those nights too, if anybody's coming up for that. Then for auroras. Now there's lots of different opinions when you're shooting auroras, and they're all correct. I'm not against other people's opinions. Oh, someone asked if I used the 500 rule for Milky Way shots. I actually used the 400 rule. It's like, if you guys aren't familiar with the 5 or 400 rule, you can just Google it. There's lots of YouTube videos, but it basically means every lens and camera, you can do a mathematical formula, like you divide your focal length by 400. It'll tell you how many seconds you can shoot before you get star trails. But I just used the 400 because I got the Art Sigma lens, so I can do that. Because the aperture on this one's 1.4. But I generally just shoot the Milky Way at 10 seconds anyway. But yeah, you don't want to go too long. Auroras are what, unfortunately, there's so many people nowadays because of the Facebook Aurora groups. They're wonderful. But then it gets these people who just bought a camera, have never shot at night, and they go try to shoot auroras and they never shot at night. It's kind of sad when you see them fail. And I used to get messages all the time about camera settings. People always ask me, what camera settings do I have to use to shoot the auroras tonight? It's really not that simple. You have to learn how to focus on all that other stuff. But here's a general rule for auroras. There's two kinds of auroras. There's those weak ones where you can see them on the horizon. If they're really weak auroras, just use the settings I taught you earlier, the 3.5, 3200, and adjust your shutter speed. But those nights, when they're really, you can see them in the sky, they're just moving. You can almost hear them. You know, down this far south, we get about 2 of those a year. I'm sure you folks in Red Deer area, you get a whole bunch more than that. But you want to try to shoot those in 5 seconds, 10 seconds max. 5 seconds would be ideal. That way you could see the movement in them. So if you already know how to focus and you got experience shooting at night, when you do get those kind of auroras, you can shoot them in 5 seconds or 10. Even if you have to crank up your ISO, then you can see the movement. And these are so bright that even if there's a moonless night, you'll still cast, the auroras will still cast shadows under you because they're practically right over your head. They're so bright. I've been shooting these things now for like 12 years. Well, I tried one in 2005, it failed. But as soon as they get to that point where you can see them moving and they're really high in the sky, it's brighter than a full moon actually. So those are the ones I like to shoot 5 seconds. But with this camera, I can shoot them in 2 seconds. But that way you see the movement. But don't wait till there's an aurora to go learn night photography. Try to get this done in advance. And go pick out your night photography, your aurora shots in advance too. And try not to pick the popular ones. I've recently heard that places like, in 2012, I went to Moraine Lake. No, not Moraine Lake, Lake Minnewanka. And I was shooting the auroras all by myself. I was there for like an hour. Nobody. But now I've heard that Lake Minnewanka is so busy that you can't even get in there anymore. So try to find your own secret spot. So when the auroras come out and you know where to go. And you know that when your phone app tells you that tonight's going to be mega auroras, it doesn't mean it's guaranteed. The best auroras I've ever seen happen on nights when the phone didn't even predict it. They just come out. You're out there minding your own business, only the auroras come out. So that Alberta Aurora Hunters group, whatever they call it, I think it's called Alberta Aurora Hunters. It's very helpful in the fact that when other photographers are starting to post that they can see the auroras, that's when you should probably start heading out. So if you see someone posting from, oh, I live in Wainwright, I can see the auroras like crazy now, then go. And then you know that sometimes they go away, then they come back, and you know, auroras are cruel because Mother Nature just tricks you all the time. But you want to shoot those faster to get the movement. But most importantly, just go out there and make sure you get a well-exposed image that's in focus. Oh yes, it's called Alberta Aurora Chasers. It's really popular right now. There's a lot more people on it now than there was like 2 years ago. So you're going to see a lot of messages every day, but it's really helpful. In 2015, the auroras were out like every 3rd night. In 2010, I went out every night for like about 45 days before I finally saw an aurora. That's because they come in phases. 2010, before there was apps, there was no aurora. It was hard. 2015 is at the peak. They're out all the time. I think this year might be a peak year just because of how much activity there's been recently. So This would be a great year to go pick out a whole bunch of spots to go shoot at night and get auroras. And hopefully they come out. People always ask me, what time do they come out? It's a weird that, you know, they say there's no time, but I think 11 o'clock seems to be the most likely time that you see them. I don't know why. It just always seems to be at 11 o'clock or 1 a.m. That's just where I live. But I just noticed that they always come out at those two times. I don't think it's planned that way, and it's probably just my imagination, but it seems to work. Oh, went too far too ahead. All right, so any other questions so far? All right, so we'll talk about some painting with light, because this is the one that to me is the most fun about night photography. With night photography, I've got to the point where I actually just prefer now, I don't worry about night events that much. I just actually prefer shooting cool stuff, using lighting kits to make them look even cooler, urban and rural. Oh yes, I'm gonna go over those. Someone's asking me how I light the inside of the buildings. I got all my fun stuff here. I'm just gonna get my expensive lens out of the way so I don't knock it over. But I'm gonna teach you how I light the outside and inside with just regular products. I don't buy expensive equipment for lighting, because when you're out in rural Saskatchewan shooting at places like this, you don't want to be bringing your expensive lighting kits. Like, I know some people buy those Lume cubes for like $150, but you know that for me, I lose, like if I use this flashlight 10 times, I'll lose it once. It's just easy to lose things in the middle of nowhere. So I recommend you just buy inexpensive equipment, or just be very careful about not losing things. So once you know how to shoot at night, I love going to buildings like this. It could be buildings, grain elevators, hoodoos, anything that I could just get flashlights on them. So those are the camera settings for this night, but it just depends on what night you have and equipment. So first of all, let's go over some lights. I always have a really bright flashlight. I don't use it for painting with light. This flashlight is just meant for me to focus on buildings when I need it, for walking around, or for inspecting creepy sounds. So I keep one big bright flashlight, and I don't really do much painting with light. I do rarely have to use it though. Like if you're lighting something really far. And I also don't buy flashlights from grocery stores. Mine are all hardware store flashlights. They cost more. Like this one was like $45, but it's weather resistant. You can drop it and it doesn't do that weird flickering. And you know, those grocery store ones, they die so easy. I even bought ones on Amazon and they're just crap. Oh, where did oh yes. I also have a medium flashlight. It's not as bright, but I use this for most of my painting with light. And I got a little mini flashlight. I love the mini flashlight because it's dimmer, but this one also has the focusing. You can probably see it on my shirt. There it's wide open, but you can also focus to beam in. That can be very handy sometimes. So wide and zoom. I love this little light. Every flashlight's different because of its brightness and stuff like that. Like they're all different. That's why I usually carry at least 5 or 6 of them with me. Because when you're doing painting with light, like at this abandoned house, people I've been asked, how many seconds do you light it? Well, that's a good question, because abandoned buildings need more light than white painted churches, because this absorbs light, white painted churches reflect it. So a white church, you may just light it for 2 seconds, but an abandoned house, it might be like 4 seconds or 5 or 6 seconds. Also depends on how bright or dim your flashlight is. I prefer not having a bright flashlight on my subjects just because you get those specular highlights. So I like to use a softer flashlight more time. And it also depends on how close and far away you get from the subject. So if you're lighting something and you find it's too bright, instead of doing less light, I'll just walk a few feet further away. I'm not really good like with lighting science, but I've learned this from another photographer. If you press the shutter button and light something for like 5 seconds, in the next picture, you walk half the distance towards the house and light it for another 5 seconds, it doesn't double the light, it's 4 times the light. So if you need less light, you only have to walk backwards like about 6-10 feet and then try the same amount of light again. It takes about 10 times to get it right. I don't just do this on one try, but I'm going to go through the process with this one. Once I hit the shutter button, I got my cameras all set up. I did my test shots. I like everything. Once I hit the shutter button, in this case, I walked into the exposure. You just don't see me because I kept moving. As long as you keep moving, don't light yourself and don't let the camera see the flashlight, you can be in the exposure. So once I hit the shutter button, I walked halfway close to the building. And as I'm walking in front of the building, and the reason why I moved the flashlight is to prevent hot spotting. If you just hold the flashlight still, you'll just get a hot spot somewhere. So I moved the flashlight as I'm walking. So I just walked through the exposure, lighting the house as I walked by. It took me 10 tries to get the right brightness, the right angles. Sometimes the left was too bright, sometimes the right was too bright. But that's why it's so much easier when you do this with a friend. I used to do night photography with a friend, Megan, but then she went and got a job, so she doesn't come out at night anymore. So I'm usually by myself. But that's also when I'm walking past the house lighting, the flashlight is not flat at the house while I'm walking by. My flashlight's at an angle and I'm lighting from the side. When you light from an angle, you're making sure you can see shadows. There's no, this fills in all the shadows. This brings out the depths, the textures, the shapes and stuff like that. So I always keep my flashlight angled. I never try to fill in by lighting flat onto the house. So I'm in here the whole time. Now there's two ways I light the inside. If I have someone with me, like in this house in particular, right? I had this hippie. She was supposed to be my helper, but then she went home because she heard the creepy sounds. So the hippie, she was going to go into the attic. You see this cellophane gift wrap bag stuff? You can hear it. I just got this yellow cellophane gift wrap stuff, and I tape it to flashlights on time. So in this case, the hippie was going to go in the attic, and when I was shooting, she was going to turn this light on for a couple seconds, and then turn it off. But since the hippie didn't stick around, I use these tea lights. These are like 12 for $9 at Walmart. If you take one of these tea lights and just throw that in a window, that's how much light one tea light will light up for 25 seconds. I know it looks very dim now, but once it gets in that house, it's pretty bright. So it depends on how you want to do it, but these have warm temperatures. You don't want white light inside buildings. You want a warm temperature. So you can use tea lights, but I now use these dome lights and I just tape. The problem is though, if you leave it on like this, will be too bright for 25-second exposure. So if you lay this down, that's too bright. So what you can also do is just put it upside down and it'll cut the light by like 2/3. But that's what you can do if you're by yourself. But if you throw this in the window, you're not going to go back and get your light. I'm not going into these abandoned houses by myself in the middle of the night, and I'm not going to go back inside and get the light. You're sort of sacrificing your 80 cents. But safety first, right? Some houses I'll go in, but not this one. So this took me 10 tries with just ordinary equipment you can buy from the hardware store. I have shot with people who actually have camera flashes set up on stands, you know, way over here to light their buildings, and they'll use professional Lume Cube stuff. But I also found something dirt cheap on Amazon. It's this really cool light wand, like 40, I think it was like 40 or $50. You can turn it on, and there's a warm temperature and a cold temperature, and you can also dim and brighten it. And it just charges in a USB port, so it doesn't take any batteries, because I hate batteries. Problem is, I went to go check it out before class, and it says it's currently unavailable. So I'll put a link to it. Actually, I'll do it right now so I don't forget. I'll put a link to this so when it does come back, this is like the coolest thing ever for night. Oh, here it is. This little wand is so handy. They make more expensive ones too, but this one's just, it's so small, it's so lightweight, and it doesn't take batteries. You can just, it even has a remote control, but I already lost it. Okay, so I put that in the link. So when it comes back, maybe if you guys like night photography. All right, I'm on the wrong screen. Okay, how did I do that? I used to be good at PowerPoint like 25 years ago. There we go. So yes, those are some of the things that I like to do. I got some more to go over, but I also forgot to mention one thing with night photography. If you've never done night photography, when you're done at the end of the night, always put your camera settings back before you go home. Don't wait till you're home before you do camera settings, because every time you forget, tomorrow you're going to see a moose in your backyard, and you're going to have manual focus, 30-second exposures. So before I go home, I always put my autofocus back to autofocus, or my focus back to auto, and I don't use 30-second exposures. I go back to normal camera settings. Do that before you go home, not when you get home. All right. So anybody have any questions about the painting light so far? Because here's what this dome light looks like at night. So there's a video of me putting this dome light in this old school bus. See how bright this dome light looks like at night? It looks very dim now, but at nighttime, look how bright that is. So sometimes I have to flip it upside down to get the right picture. So all I'm doing is taking one picture, and that's what it looks like. I walked to my right, and I lit the school bus with my mini flashlight. I could have done more extensive stuff, but this was just a basic example for me to show people how simple lighting things is. But notice the arrow. I went to my right. Most night photographers that I see in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and BC, and everywhere else I go, they'll hit the shutter button and they stand behind a camera and they light things like this. It doesn't look good. It's great for a test shot, but once you get your test shot done, once you hit your shutter button, don't light from behind a camera unless you have to. Walk to your left or to your right or just some direction so you can see the texture, shapes, and depth. Like, it's so much better. I got an example to show you here in a second. So using the camera settings I just taught you, and with these consumer products, you could just do simple stuff like this. I also have a friend who does what's called Photoshop stacking. It's really neat. I'm not against it. But what they'll do is they'll go and they'll take a picture, light one thing, take another picture, light another thing, until basically they got all their stuff lit, and then they'll stack all the images together so they can make it look like the headlights are on, that those orange lights are on too. I try to just do that myself in 30 seconds. My new Nikon, for whatever reason, Nikon now makes these cameras, these new mirrorless ones, where you can go beyond 30 seconds because most cameras are limited to 30. This one goes up to 15 minutes now because I learned early, don't run at night. You'll always find that one thing to trip and hurt yourself. So now with a 15-minute exposure, I could go around and do all this stuff. I could have lit the buildings behind there too if I wanted. In fact, I'm going to do some of that this year. I may not always go 15-minute exposures, but I can at least go 2 minutes, 4 minutes. But of course, then the stars will move. The easiest places ever to learn night photography, do painting with light, are rural abandoned churches. Not abandoned, sorry, just rural churches that are painted white. Because that's 2 seconds of light to light up all that. That's the church south of Leader, Saskatchewan. So once I hit my shutter button, I walked 25 feet to my right, and I lit that church with the mini flashlight. Also, here's another tip. Oh, where did I get the dome light? I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I bought these dome lights at London Drugs. They're like $8. They also sell them at hardware stores sometimes. They're just those ones you've got batteries in here, and you press the top to turn them on and off. They're really, really easy. And because I lose one of them every 10 times I use it, like you just lose or step on them, that's why I don't use those Lume Cube $150 lights. Those would probably work better. But yeah, I don't like losing stuff, and I tend to lose a lot of these. You can, oh yeah, Costco too. That's another good one. We don't have one here in Shaunavon, but yeah, Costco's I'm sure sells them as well. Also, you can use your hand to block some light. Like when I'm shooting buildings, sometimes I'll use my hand. I'll turn on the flashlight to not light the ground. Or in this case, as you can tell, I didn't lit my tree. So I used my flashlight and I used my hand to block the light so it did not light any of that tree because I wanted it to not be lit. Oh yeah, and someone even says that dollar stores sometimes sell Halloween lights. I've seen those too. It should be really easy to, and then gift wrap bags for the cellophane work great too. Oh, one time I got really desperate. You know, if you forgot cellophane, like warm temperature stuff, you could just go to the gas station and buy some cheesy poofs and eat all the cheesy poofs, then put your flashlight in the cheesy poof bag and it makes a warm temperature too. I've done that before. But yeah, churches are the easiest just because the grounds are usually pretty safe. There's no holes or hazards. So if you can find yourself a rural church somewhere, it's a great place to get started. I know some areas have more than others. But here's what I mean by lighting from this angle. So I'm lighting my buildings. I hit my shutter button and I walk to my right 25 feet, and then I light the building from an angle. By the way, this is the house that's in my class coming in May. My friend owns that. So see, by me walking to the right, look at the difference. See, it's because it's from an angle, you can see the depth and details in the building. Lighting from behind the camera wouldn't look this good. Also notice something too in this picture. I love shooting on cloudy nights. The lower the clouds, the cooler. I actually almost think low, creepy clouds are the funnest night event I like to shoot now. I like them more than auroras. I like them more than meteors because they're so spooky looking. And look at what one dome light did inside that house. It's probably too much light. So in this case, I probably should have put the dome light upside down or use these tea lights. But there's a raccoon living in that house, so I didn't want to go in there too many times. He's gone now, though. So this is what most people do in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And I'm not saying that this is bad. I'm just saying that I don't think it looks good. They've got expensive equipment. They'll do all the settings right. Then they'll stand and they'll hit the shutter button and it'll just light from behind the camera. That's what I used to do until about 2013. But then I started, and this is why my pictures look different. As you can see, I had normal cameras, normal lighting. My settings are normal, just average, but it's my lighting. Here's what normal people do. Here's what I do. I hit the shutter button, walk 25 feet to my left. By the way, this house is in that tour coming next month too, or in May. See, this is why changing the angle of lighting changes the image dramatically, especially when you want to accentuate some of the details in this building. Like, it's really cool to light from an angle. I do this with hoodoos whenever I can. Even when I'm shooting mountains at night, I try not to shoot when the full moon is directly behind me. I like when the moon's to my left or to my right, but behind me a little bit, so you can see the details in the mountains and stuff like that. So that's one of the biggest things to do if you want to just be different, is just light from different angles. And don't overlight stuff if you can, so you don't see specular highlights. Remember, I'm doing all this by myself. So if you guys actually have friends, you'll do better than this. Here in Shaunavon, anybody who's a night owl in my town, they're usually drunk, stoned. They're not out. I don't have any friends to go shoot night photography with. My RCMP friend, he was only allowed to watch because he was on call. He couldn't actually help, so he's kind of useless. So if I could do this by myself, you could do better if you just have people to go with you. And I get asked a lot, this is the front cover of my latest book, the Grain Elevator one. And a lot of people have messaged me since it came out asking, how did you like that one? It probably wasn't the brightest thing in the world to do, but I put a flashlight on the bottom of my drone and I put the drone above, so it's coming down. But did you notice that nobody ever looked at this and said, what ISO did you use? ISO is important, but everybody is fascinated by how the buildings that you, or the things that you shoot and how you light them. That's a drone. I do this, I've done this a few times now after this, but it's just a drone with a flashlight. In fact, the Mavic 2 Pro, which I got now, has a light built into the bottom, but that's a $2,500 drone. It's not smart to fly drones in the middle of the night. Yeah, so be very careful. You don't want to crash it. But yeah, so that's just a normal shot. If I had a friend with me, we could have lit the inside of that grain elevator in this building, but I'm by myself, so I didn't have enough time. So again, you could do better than what I did just by having friends with you. This is what happens if you stop moving while you're lighting buildings. You see me here? This is also what happens if you don't find your hazards before you shoot. You'll get a picture of yourself with your face in the ground. So when you're out shooting at night, always make sure you are familiar with all the hazards. I've got a few of these kind of pictures with my face in the ground. One thing I noticed when I do my classes out here, sometimes people get out of the car, turn on their flashlights, and they're walking around with their flashlight in their eyes in the air. When you're out at night, keep your flashlight on the ground and your eyes on the ground, and then stop and gaze, because I'm tall. Every time I fall, it hurts. So I've come to the habit of, I don't walk where my eyes, I can't see. Don't hurt yourself doing this. Well, otherwise you get pictures of it. I got a whole bunch of these. I even got ones where the flashlight's flying through the air and stuff. I should make a collection just called Pictures of Me Falling. But you also don't want to wreck your stuff either. How are we doing for time? Oh, yes. So a few minutes ahead. Now I I am starting to post on YouTube a bunch of videos, and I'm going to be making a whole bunch of them starting right about now, of just me. Where did I put the YouTube one? Oh, here it is. Of just me, like I'm going to try to make 3-minute videos of me just going out to places, shooting them, and telling you what I did and why I did them. I'm going to make them 3 minutes long, just short, because, you know, nobody wants to watch people for 20, 30 minutes. But I have made some videos already and uploaded some of them. Like there's some cool things in Saskatchewan that you could go shoot at night. Oh yeah, I went to the Clown Motel in Nevada last week. I put that one on there, but that's different. But yeah, if you want, you can subscribe to this too. I'll be posting a bunch of cool stuff. Where is my? And for anybody, I'm going to post this into the pan or the chat here. It's a link to my website, where on this part of the website you can download the cheat sheet again if you lose it. And I do talk about some of the lenses and stuff that I bought. And I have some different lighting kits that I've used in the past. But I only use, just so you guys know too, I only use Lightroom. I don't use Photoshop. I'm not against Photoshopping, but in Lightroom, you can increase brightness, add some contrast, increase shadows. You can do the basics in Lightroom and do amazing stuff. If you don't want to Photoshop, you don't have to. It's just a personal choice for me. Mostly, I just don't know how to use it. But when I get in a Lightroom, here's one little super big thing I've learned over the years. I should go find a better night shot. When you're shooting stuff, of course, now it slows down. I got an audience. Let's see if I found something at night that I shot. Did you guys know that in the American South, like right from California to Texas, I already knew it was going to be warmer at night in winter. What I didn't know was there's no wind down there at night. So I went and did some trips this year. Okay, so when you're in Lightroom and you're editing for your night photography, I only use the basic sliders. The contrast, highlights, and I'll probably make some, where did I put them? Oh, this thing's in the way. Oh, it's on this side. I have all these things in the way, so I can't see what I'm doing. Okay, so I usually just stick to the basics. I'll do some contrast, especially play with highlights and shadows, but it's all I mostly use. But one thing I don't think most people know in Lightroom, under calibration, especially for night photography, when you play with this blue primary, this is where most of the magic for my picture comes from, is the blue primary saturation tool. It can really change an image a lot. And when people see the picture, they think it's, oh, you got a cool camera, you got some cool whatever. No, it's just from one. Oh, you're only seeing my PowerPoint? Oh, sorry. How do I get out of that then? Okay. Screen sharing is possible. Sorry, that was my fault. New share. Now you can see my Lightroom.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah. Okay. So when I'm editing in Lightroom, I mostly just stick these main things: the white balance, the contrast, highlight, shadows, blacks, right into here. That's mostly all I do. I don't do any of this. Well, I've done tone curve in the past. I guess I did with this one. But under the calibration tool, the very last one, you see these things that nobody ever uses these. But for night photography, when you play with this blue slider here, saturation, that's what I'm talking about. That's the one where it changes my images that people think, oh, your pictures look so cool. It's just because I usually pop it just a little bit, like a few points. You see how much it changes for night photography. It even brightens some of the areas. Ever since I started playing with this about 5 years ago, oh, I don't have any more. We go back to mine. So if anybody here uses Lightroom, once you do your basic edits, I just took a whole bunch more Death Valley. So I'll just see if I can find a night one. I just took so you could see it happening. Of course, I can't find any. I should have had that one ready. But if anybody here uses Lightroom, that calibration slider at night. Oh, here we go. I forgot. No, that's not it. It's amazing what it will do to your pictures for night photography. Here we go. We got some night ones here. So here's what I haven't even edited yet. And just look what happens when you play with that blue slider. under calibration. I probably should make a video about this one, but it's just so cool. I think this is the coolest thing in Lightroom for night photography, is playing with that, the blue. I mean, I've done it with the green, but it's not as fun as the blue one. Those things just look dorky, but yeah. So if you're in Lightroom, I think that Photoshop Camera Raw has that same calibration blue slider too, but it just makes night photography pop. Aurora is everything. So that's my only Lightroom secret for night photography that I have. Otherwise, everything else I just try to do correct in camera. So if anybody does have any questions, oh, someone's got a great thing. Oh, someone's got a question here. Just gonna open this up. Oh, someone's gonna be camping at Grasslands National Park. That's near me. It's known for its night sky. Have you done night photography at Grasslands? Well, there's two Grasslands. There's the main one near Val Marie, and I've done night photography there. It's really good. I like it a lot. The only tip there is really bad cell phone coverage. So go during the day and pick out your spots. Also, 70-mile butte at Grasslands by Val Marie. There's a ton of rattlesnakes in May and October. And the rest of the year, they scatter throughout the park, but they're usually hanging around 70-mile butte, and you'll hear them in May and October. The other Grasslands National Park near Rock Glen, oh, nights are very cold in May. It's not that bad. I found it's you may have just came in a cold night in May, Eddie, but I found it's actually not that bad. Maybe that's just because I live in Saskatchewan. But the other grassland is near Rock Glen, Saskatchewan, and that's the one with the mysterious Badlands. The tip for that one, if you're going to that one, Valley of 1,000 Devils, is world class. It's hard to get to. It's a 5-kilometer walk each way, but it's super surreal. It would be worth it if you're going to that one. Oh, or no. By the way, the Badlands Grasslands has no rattlesnakes. It's weird, but 70-mile butte has rattlesnakes. If you get bit by one, you just have to go to the hospital within, like, a few hours. But Alberta has, and Saskatchewan too, has so many world-class places for night photography. Dinosaur Park, Drumheller, Red Rock Coulee, Writing on Stone. Like, it's just packed with amazing places to shoot at night that right now are not very popular. Nobody likes snakes. But and then of course you've got Banff. It's so cool. They closed Cascade Falls, unfortunately, so you can't shoot there at night anymore. Waterton, yes, I forgot about that one. It's so windy down there though. But yeah, Waterton's really cool. I mean, they're all world class and they're all amazing, and they're all within a reasonable drive. And the best time for me for night photography has always been May and again in October. Mosquitoes are dead, sun goes down early enough, and there's usually not any problem with lots of people. So your best time for doing night photography is coming up in another few weeks. April's not that bad either. David Thompson Country, yes. That one's really nice. I've done that a few times, but I went to go shoot Cascade Falls. Is that what it's called? Or Crescent Falls? That one with a double waterfall on David Thompson Country. They closed the bottom part off now with a fence. Like, I know people can still sneak in, but I wanted to shoot that one at night. And of course, you got all the abandons. Bobby Scott does really good abandoned tours in the Red Deer area, well, mostly Stettler area, every year. If you ever get a chance to do his tour, he gets permission from all the owners, and he does an amazing tour. They're kind of expensive because mine, I just do 3 hours of night photography. We don't do like a whole weekend of stuff. So mine's not as exciting, but it's only 3 hours, but we get to see stuff. But otherwise, yeah, Crescent Falls, that's right. Yeah, they closed the bottom off. So unfortunately, that one's off the list now.
Chris, are you doing, I think, were you not doing one in Stettler, or is that still on? Like, were you not doing a shot, or was that just a class?
Yeah, I'm doing like a normal class, like in-classroom classes. Like, okay. I do those ones all year, but you just took it, so you don't need to, you don't need to take mine again. Yeah. But if anybody is interested in doing the infield one here in Shaunavon, the only problem is, though, it's like 6.5 hour drive to get here from Red Deer.
Yeah.
Bobby Scott's infield night classes are around Stettler usually.
Yeah.
Got some pretty good ones. I guess I can turn this thing off. Stop share. Whoops. But yeah, I might do a night photography thing at Dinosaur Park, but you pay for the permit and the insurance, and even if it rains, you still have to pay for your permit and insurance anyway until you kind of get, you know. So I might do it anyway because, you know, it's so cool to shoot there, but yeah.
Oh, this is great. We've had a lot of new members, so I'm hoping that they've benefited from this, and even the ones that shoot a lot of night, I think they picked up some tips. So this has been great. Great images, yeah.
Well, I really hope you guys like that. Thank you so much for inviting me. I get really excited when I see people doing night photography, especially once they've, you know, like done like something by presentation or classes. It gets me really excited. So I'll be keeping an eye out for that.
Okay. So you're okay with us sending you some of our images then?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds great. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any other questions or? Nope. Okay, there we go.
A shy group, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can see the chat. They're thanking me, so thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks, Chris. That was really cool, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. That was really interesting. I know I got some good tips out of it too. So, off to the dollar store I go.
And I think you've inspired us. I think we need to have a urban night workshop. I think that would be a good thing to do. So yeah, thanks for that.
We'll have you look after that for us, Judy. Thanks.
Okay, no
comment. Thanks for volunteering for that.
Anyways,
all right, thanks again to Chris. And now the next part of our evening is our assignment images. So Bill, I see you're on the call tonight. So if you're ready to share that with us, and this is from our last month's assignment on light trails.
Sure. Okay, let me just share my screen here. Hang on. Okay, and what is it? Control F5. Here we go. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. If what we're going to do is just go through all 17 or 19 of them, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free, give a shout. This one got a lot of positive comments. That's a really neat idea, following the curve of the bottle there. Just out of curiosity, this bridge, is that over the Blind Man River or the Medicine?
That's in Markerville.
Oh, yeah. Markerville, okay. Cool shot of the bright lights. This taken must be at Christmas at Sylvan, is it?
So, I was just back to that one, Bill. So, was that using a bit of ICM? I think maybe, or like a camera movement. Do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, nice shot.
Infinity.
Nice lit up infinity there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm really curious. What is this?
It looks like oil and water, maybe.
That's the waterfall in the museum at Drumheller.
Really?
Oh.
And I just played with it. I used Liquify in Photoshop.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. It's nice abstract, Scotty. Yeah.
Thank you.
Northern Lights. And we've got the
Big Dipper? Yeah.
the Big Dipper, yeah. Streak of lights. Oh yeah. I got a few questions about where is the light trail on this one, and this is actually a 25-second shot, and those white things you see framing Creepy Doll is a sparkler. That's the only light available.
Oh.
Hmm.
Nice sunset shot, I would guess. Just curious, why are all these people down there in the foreground? Does anybody explain that?
I just noticed that. Okay.
Everybody was waiting for the fireworks to take place off in the distance. This was a July shot.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice. Let's use the lens ball there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the comments saying this would be a neat 6-foot long wall abstract. And I agree, it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nice leading line on this one going off in the distance.
Mm.
Or it's coming in from the distance.
Yeah, I guess so, isn't it?
Yeah, because otherwise they were on the wrong side of the road.
Mm.
This Washington Capitals?
Oh, so
I love caps.
Someone made something about caps photograph.
Oh.
I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, okay, caps. There we go.
Isn't that our trophy? And
oh, is it? Yes. Is it? I don't know. I've never had the trophy, so I don't know.
Geez, I guess we work harder, eh, Judy?
Yeah, I guess so.
Good idea. Okay, another one that had me scratching my head.
Mm-hmm.
Could the photographer please explain? Looks like a sheet of paper.
there's an abstract painting hanging on the wall that I lit with the red stripes are laser level, and then I blasted it twice with a flashlight to bring the center out.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
That's using live composite on Olympus TG6. Tough point and shoot camera.
So when you say live composite, you mean you do the composite right there, right in the camera? Then.
Yeah, you can watch every one of the changes that you make to it and decide when to when you've
had enough.
Wow.
Wow. Hmm.
Very creative.
Lots of fun.
This is Banff, I take it? I'm guessing that's Calgary.
Yeah.
The shot of the cars going underneath, though. I'm guessing the person is standing on a overpass.
Yeah.
Good perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that's it. That's all.
Yeah, I've been to that spot there. That's a great spot if anybody's in Calgary. What is that, McLeod Trail? And you go south as you're going up the hill towards Chinook Mall. There's some cemeteries there, and then that's a footbridge over to the LRT station at the cemeteries. So you can kind of stand on that footbridge. I've taken some stuff there too.
Neat. Okay, that's it for February. Just a reminder that the next one is due on March 6th, and that theme is emotion. Okay. Back to you, Mark.
All right. Well, thanks, Bill. Thanks for that. And that will conclude our meeting for tonight. And thanks to everybody for joining. Thanks again to Chris for the presentation, Judy for bringing Chris on board, and Bill for presenting those images. Just a reminder, our next meeting, we should be back at the Golden Circle doing the hybrid Zoom and live at the Golden Circle. So that will be Wednesday, the 9th, I believe. And doors will open at 6:30. We'll get set up and start the Zoom session at 6:45 as we have been doing. Okay, so good night, everybody.
Hey, Mark. Thanks.
Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.